Tonight is part 9, and I'm pretty sure next week is going to be part 10,
Awesome.
and I'm pretty sure that that's going to be it. Knowing God's direction, that's what we've been talking about. But tonight I want to start with asking you guys to name one thing that you're for and one thing that you're against. Be able to say why and be able to do it briefly, because there's a lot of us in here and it's just something I'm just throwing at you. I'm just wondering. Something you're for can be anything. Something you're against could be anything. And be able to say why you're for and why you're against. And if nothing comes to mind, if you got nothing to say, that's fine too. Just wondering.
I guess nothing that comes to mind is I'm for a lifestyle that fosters a healthy family's growth and against one where money takes dominance over that.
Okay, I don't think that needs a why. That's pretty clear. That's pretty good. That's very good.
Okay, I guess for communication, relating, well, whether it's playing music together, talking together, talking and listening, two-way communication.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm against people who just don't stick to commitments, or make them very lightly. Just make them without really considering the impact of not following through on just something.
Okay.
And whether it's a kid expecting dad says he's going to take him to the ball game and doesn't, or whether it's an adult, work situation where somebody's supposed to do this part of the job, you're supposed to do that part, and they don't. And just it leaves other people.
So what would you say why would be the reason you would be against that then?
Leaving people hanging or disappointed in the expectations, not that kind of disregard for the other person. That's the part I guess.
Okay.
So maybe that would have been better. Disregard for others.
No, it's okay, but yeah. In a minute, you'll kind of see why I'm sort of starting this way. But anybody else, anything that comes to mind? Like I say, we don't have to spend a long time with this. If you have something, though, go ahead.
I am for dance and movement because I feel like it's really a form of expression that it can be helpful for some people who have a hard time putting into words what they're thinking or feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And I am against self-righteous indignation.
Well,
Because I think it's very harmful to the human spirit.
okay, we'll settle with those.
You want one?
What's that?
It takes me a while sometimes. I'm for peace. And
You're not running for Miss America, are you?
Not
Come on.
no, because
like world
and not
peace.
confusion, because I think there's it comes up a lot of times in mind. The one verse that says God is not the author of confusion,
Mhm.
but of peace in all the churches of the saints. So often we get have anxiety, over confusion, things we're not sure about. We're like a wave just tossed about.
and, don't always have wisdom on things. The peace is, the source from God that gives us the wisdom of what's happening in and around us.
Mhm.
You know, when we have peace, we're casting our cares all upon Him. When I don't cast my care upon God, when I'm not trusting in the Lord, I would have distress, confusion, not peace, and that's where I need to make sure I stay centered. Trust in the Lord with all my heart and lean not on my own understanding, because my understanding is going to cause confusion and distress. It's simple as I
Mhm.
guess that takes a while.
The reason why I opened like this is because of two things. Tonight we're looking at wills, not last will and testament. Wills like God's will and man's will, which to me seems to be crucial to know in order to make determinations of knowing God's direction. If we know God and know God's will, then His direction becomes much easier to know. It's this whole story, knowing God's direction. And so asking you the one positive, one negative, whatever. I had read an article this last week, midweek, in the Huffington Post, the religion section, that American Christianity has been hijacked. And his point was, he was reporting on a Lutheran youth convention in Detroit, 15,000 youth, that spent a few days, a week, I'm not sure how many days, but worshiping and doing what they do in the convention center, and then going out into communities and helping people, and really impacting Detroit, which we all know is a very, very needy city. And he wasn't so much interested in making that report as saying what's happened to Christianity, and feeling as though it's been what he called hijacked with negativism, that there's a lot of social issues and things going on that Christians are very, very quick to jump up and bite and say something negative about something, but not do anything about it. So basically nobody is interested anymore. And he said in American Christianity, that's not its roots. Something has actually happened in America to American Christianity to make Christians combination bitter, negative, the whole thing. Instead of going to a place like Detroit, investing yourself, loving people, and having a way of impacting the social issues that we may see as harmful, other than just being condemning and everything else. He said that the shop owners and the people in Detroit were so blessed by these young people, because they could have gone any place. They could have been in Vegas, they could have been in LA, they could have been any place. They went to one of the worst cities in America to bless the city and to just worship and just pour out the Spirit of God in that place. The guy was writing the article and saying what has happened to that Christianity, because that's our roots. A generation ago, if you said you were a Christian, there may have been a price to be paid in terms of you're a wacko, but they would not have seen you as negative. The thing about Christians, they've got this thing about loving everybody. It's a positive thing. So, that got me to thinking after I read the article, so basically, whose will are we lining up with? Because as I was reading the article, what I was hearing was a sense of we've strayed from God's will, while you mentioned self-righteous indignation. That we've almost harvested that now, we've almost breeded it. And that was kind of where he was coming in from. It was so refreshing to not hear anybody screaming and yelling about a variety of social issues that are very disturbing for sure. But that's not our platform. That is not the platform we stand and scream out. So, God's will and our will. Again, like the last few weeks, it's a huge subject. We're not going to do a great big thing on it. I'm going to try to just really kind of bring one thought with a few different looks to it. Did you ever notice that in Genesis 1, God never says what he's going to do? He doesn't say, I will do this or I will do that. Everything that comes from a place of let there be, which simply means to speak it into existence. So it's not like when we're looking at that, we can almost try to superimpose a will. Well, that was God's will. We immediately gravitate towards will. The question has to be asked, though, do you think that perhaps we don't understand God's will and when God actually started to demonstrate his will? In other words, the let there be just simply means to be or to become, to exist. Let there be.
To manifest.
Yeah, to manifest. Very good. That's what it means. Now, theologians, great theologians, Gary, you've probably read more articles than, great theologians have written articles and take this position. Well, you need to understand God's perfect will and his permissive will. If you've never heard that, and you go into some place on a Sunday morning, eventually you will. Because that is the way we speak. And that's the way we deal with things. Oh, well, that's God's perfect will, that's his permissive will. So, if that's true, then what we're really saying is that God has two wills.
Or he settles.
He what?
He settles.
What do you mean he settles?
This is what I wanted, but I'll settle on the second one.
Mm-hmm. Which is
That doesn't sound like God.
no, it's a similar, not a God who in Genesis 1 says, let there be, good.
Mm-hmm.
Let there be, he speaks, and it's good. And if we're going to get a hold of anything about God, if we want to attach a will to it, and I'm not sure we should, because I don't believe that's really what's being demonstrated in Genesis 1, and this is me speaking, I don't think God was giving us a manifestation of his will. I think he was giving us a manifestation of himself.
Absolutely.
So, looking at Genesis 1, we might say stuff like, and it sort of sounds a little bit like with what you're saying, because we do have different passages. I've written down a few. We're not going to look at them, but sometime if you want to, we can, where God changed his mind. Very clearly, it says God changed his mind. Okay? Now, that's not two wills, although some people would see it that way. It's just God changing his mind. In different situations where he was going to do one thing, Moses prayed, all right, then I'm going to do this. He was going to do something, Joshua prayed, oh, okay, then I'll do this.
Really?
But then we get into you can edit this out later, the whole thing where he knows everything, he knows the beginning from the end, so he knew what he was going to do. So he didn't really change his mind because he already knew that that's what it was going to be.
Well, it says he changed his mind, so that's what I'm going by, is the actual words say he
Yeah.
changed his mind, so several times.
Is that like Moses or Joshua almost advising God? Within a prayer? Like in a prayer, like God going?
No, I think that, to be honest with you, I think that this is probably a message for another time, but I think that the bottom line of it is God presenting a plan and sharing it with the leadership. And they come back and say, Dad, and they say something back. And then he takes their feedback and he says, okay, son, we'll do this.
Wow,
To me,
that's deep.
that is, and that opens up something of God that nobody ever talks about.
Wow.
Well, in the scripture about how those reason together, that would
Mhm.
fall into that.
Is that the permissive will? Like where?
No, see, I don't think it has anything to do with any of that. I
I don't
think
even
it's
know what that
it's
means,
us.
but-
Well, it's us. In other words, when people say, "Well, God allowed something to
Oh,
happen,"
yeah.
so it's his permissive will.
Yeah.
It wasn't his perfect will. It was he allowed it to happen, so it was permissive. I think that the whole problem we've got is that we're trying to turn God into a man. It's got to make sense to us. Because we have like two wills, so to speak, or we're schizoid in our will, if you would. The only way we can think of, well, God must be like that then. Otherwise we have no point of reference unless we're willing to just flat out say, I don't get it, but I know this. That if there's a demonstration, a manifestation of God's will, it's good. Period. Now maybe I don't understand good. Maybe that's the problem. Perhaps. It's not until the 2nd chapter of Genesis when it says, it is not good that man should be alone, should live alone. I will make him a helper comparable to him. Like I said, Genesis 1 makes it very clear. Everything that God says, let there be, He creates, He makes, whatever. It's always good, and the word means pleasing and beneficial. 7 times He says, it says it was good. Whatever He did, it was good. 1 time, very good. So when we get to chapter 2, this becomes a very interesting little thing. Actually, a major thing, which is why it's there. Because see what happens in chapter 2, when God says it's not good that man should be alone, it's at the same time that Adam is looking at the animals, he's noticing there's male and female. And by the way, he's not looking to heaven, he's looking on the earth. He's looking at creation. He's looking at those things around him that on one side he has responsibility for, on the other side he's looking and saying, well, isn't this fascinating? There's a male and a female, a male and a female, a male and a female. But there's nothing for me. Now what's he comparing himself to? Animals, instead of God. And not in comparing himself to God, but keeping his eyes on God. In Colossians 3, when Paul says, if you've been born in Christ, then set your affections on things above, not on below. You see, in Genesis 2, what Adam starts doing, and he's not called Adam yet. He's constantly referred to as the man. What the man starts doing is dropping his vision from God to earth and starting to look at the earth around him and starting to think. And he's almost at the point of making some decisions. What's actually happening is we are watching man's will, so to speak, develop. And it's not developing in conjunction and in harmony with God's. Because everything God did was good. Everything. But God sees that this is not good. His will is straying from mine. He's developing his own will apart from mine. Not that he has his own will. Man has a will, God has a will. But the design is that they are in a type of harmony together that makes a beautiful sound, that there's no tension.